So I'd like to start out this evening, as we all know, unprecedented times. We often talk about one budget cycle never being the same as another budget cycle, and that certainly is the case. So we have many, many challenges as we move through the budget process, and we really want to outline the presentation and take you through some of the factors and hopefully answer the questions that the community might have about the approved spending plan. So the outline of the presentation is district accomplishments and data benchmarks. We've had an opportunity to celebrate some of those with our students tonight with the top 20 and our IB diploma candidates. Also some of the budget factors. Although we haven't been together physically, business has been continuing on, and the costs, and as we prepare to resubmit our reopening plan and the costs that it will take for us to reopen school to our students and staff and do that in a safe way will truly be factors. We also have the 2021 proposed budget and bus purchase, the election of board members, and this year something different than ever before is that it is an absentee vote only, and those ballots have gone out to the community. So moving on to district accomplishments and benchmarks. So right there you see our award-winning drumline. They've done a fantastic job for the district year in and year out. Sometimes we might hear them during a board meeting, during one of their practices. Also want to talk about the fact that we were once again recognized as a top workplace by the Democrat and Chronicle for the 7th year in a row. And really what this boils down to is the outstanding staff that we have retained here in the district. They treat each other well, they work hard for children every day, and it continues to earn us the recognition of top workplace. We've also had 70 teachers district-wide participate in assessment capable learning staff development. One of the great things about our district is we're always on the cutting edge as far as training that any of our staff members have the opportunity to participate. We've had several teachers again this year be recognized and nominated by families and students as Golden Apple Award winners. And at the 7th annual Empty Bowls, which is the bowl is created by the students in art class, and it's awareness about food insecurities. We were able to raise $1,300 for the cadet cupboard. Other district accomplishments include the fact that Merton Williams raised more than $5,000 for the Ugandan water project. This is built into our IB curriculum and our service learning. So congratulations once again to the Merton Williams staff and students. Our PYP, MYP, and diploma program successfully navigated a self-evaluation process. So not only were we self-evaluated, but we also had schools from across the nation and across the world come to visit the implementation of IB here in the Hilton Central School District. As I mentioned earlier, our drumline placed first place gold medal for the New York State Percussion Circuit Championship. And most recently, we went through 20 hours of threat assessment training to keep our students and staff safe with Mark Concordia, one of the leaders in the area and the nation as far as evaluating any types of threats that students or adults could possibly make, unfortunately. Also, we had a Section 5 Division I large team championship in cheerleading. Congratulations to our cheerleading team. Section 5 girls champion in the triple jump, long jump, 55 meters hurdles, New York State champion in long jump, also second place in the hurdles, and that was an IID, so we'll be going on to compete at the Division I level. We also have a Section 5 girls champion in the pole vault, and second in New York State in only a 10th grader, Laura Regal. Looking for future promise from her in her athletic career, also an outstanding student. We have a Section 5 Class A1 wrestling champions, 4 individual Section 5 champions, and 5-time state champion Greg Giacomahalis. So that should be a familiar name for not only the local, but the national and global wrestling network. Also Section 5 Division I team champion in girls bowling. So I want to congratulate those teams, great athletes, but also great students as well.
We also look at several benchmarks related to how our students are performing academically, as well as how we stack up financially in Monroe County. So the first benchmark we look at are students earning Regents diplomas. As you can see, this most recent data of 2018, we had 93% of our students earn that Regents diploma. And over the 10-year history, you can see that we performed very well in the mid to upper 90s each year. We have also looked at those students that earn a Regents diploma with advanced designation. You can see we've had a nice uptick in that. This year it's at 63%. So those are really the students that are really pushing themselves to get that advanced designation. And again, over that 10-year period, we've had really solid numbers associated with that. So what do they do once they earn that diploma? Well, 82% of the students do decide to go on to either a 2- or 4-year college to continue their education. This year we have 61% looking to go to a 4-year school and 21% going to a 2-year school. So you can see a nice increase in those going into the 4-year area, up almost 10% from the year before. Those that are not going into college, because we know the college isn't for everybody, they are either entering the workforce, going into a trade or technical school, or also going into the military. If we start looking at some of the financial measurements, the first one we'll look at is the cost per pupil. The cost per pupil is simply our total budget divided by our total enrollment. The most recent data we have is from the 1920, our current fiscal year. And for the 11th consecutive year, we have the lowest cost per pupil in Monroe County. Our numbers comes in at around $18,777 per student. That's well below the county average of $23,003. There's several reasons for this. One of the main reasons is Hilton, we do believe, is a destination district. We're still growing. People want to move into the area. We think the school district is a big reason for that. And so our enrollment has been very stable over the time, where other districts have experienced drops in enrollment, which obviously would impact their cost per pupil. The other really comes down to the way that we budget. We do not generate a lot of fund balance from our budget. We're very frugal in that respect. You can just look at the different audits throughout New York State from the comptroller. There's many districts that do get criticized for having too much fund balance. We are definitely not one of those districts, and you'll see that as we continue on through the presentation. The other financial benchmark we look at are the county school taxes paid. Over the last several years, we've typically fallen between the 3rd and 7th, so the bottom portion of the county. This year, we are the 6th lowest in the county. You can see we're in a tight bunch there. A couple cents either way would have moved us down further. So our average homeowner based on a $125,000 home would pay roughly $2,179 in school taxes. Again, that's below the county average of $2,294. If you go all the way to the far right, you can see those two that are pretty low. They kind of flip-flop back and forth. That's usually Rush, Henrietta, or Webster. They have a much different tax base than us. They have, if you think about Rush, Henrietta, they have Marketplace Mall and car dealerships in every corner, where we're very residential in nature. So we don't have a lot of that industry to help offset the tax burden. If you go all the way to the left of the graph, the highest in the county, I won't say what district that is. However, they're very similar to us in fact that they are very residential in nature. The only difference is they are fully developed, so they don't have a lot of new growth going on in their district. So that's what helps keep our taxes down here at Hilton. As Casey mentioned, there are a lot of budget factors. I always say that there's no two budgets that are ever the same. There's always some sort of curveball that's thrown our way that makes it for a challenging budget year, and this year is certainly no different. We typically look at 3 areas as we go through and develop our budget. 2 of them are up on the screen here. The first one is the tax levy. We look to continue to display our good financial health, being respectful to the taxpayers, and providing a quality education to our students. So our proposed levy increase this year is just over $717,000, or 1.79%. And I'll talk about that throughout the presentation and what went into those decisions. The next item is the appropriated fund balance and reserves. This is our savings that we're using in order to balance our budget. At this point in time, we're keeping that flat, the same amount as it was this last year. And our goal has always been to continue to wean ourselves off of the reliance on fund balance and reserves for balancing our budget. Obviously, with the situation that we're in this year, that is going to be very difficult to maintain, and we'll touch on that as we go as well. The last item out of the three that we typically look at that I don't have up on the screen, and you'll understand why in a minute, is really funding for new initiatives. Over the last several years, we've really looked at redeploying resources in order to fund those new initiatives. So that's something that we've worked really hard on as a district, taking a look at the various programs and initiatives that we had over the years. And if we find something isn't working or isn't up to where we would like it to be, we would reallocate those resources and potentially add some additional items. So with everything that we're dealing with this year, unfortunately, we had a lot of great new initiatives that were proposed by the administrative cabinet. Unfortunately, we're not able to, at this time, go forward with any initiatives. In fact, we'll be talking about reductions later on in the presentation. So when we're talking about the tax levy, one of the things that is a major factor for us is the property tax cap. So this is often portrayed by the media as a 2% cap. It actually is the rate of inflation or 2%, whichever is less, plus or minus certain defined adjustments. And those certain defined adjustments, this is a very complex formula that we have to run through. There's about 20 different steps in order to calculate the tax cap. But the basic cap this year is 1.81%, which is the rate of inflation, which is obviously less than the 2%. And you'll see that as we move into the next slide on each of the different components. So every year the district must calculate their tax cap and report it to the New York State Office of the Comptroller. And every year the tax cap is different, and it's different for every school district throughout the state. So if we look at Hilton's property tax cap and the components that make it up for the 2021 year, we'll compare it to our current year of 1920. If we start right down at the bottom, the basic cap, it's outlined in yellow. You can see the first difference is our cap last year, the rate of inflation was 2.13%. So again, that was capped at 2%. This year, we didn't hit that 2% mark, so it actually becomes the rate of inflation, which is 1.81%. That's the basic cap. That's often what you hear from the media. Some of the major things that go into our cap number, moving up is the items in green. That is a new construction. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we believe that Hilton is still growing. We believe that families want to move to this area. We think that a big reason for them wanting to move this area is because of the school district and all of the great programs and accomplishments that you heard earlier in the presentation. So we've been pretty consistent over the years in this number. It was actually down a little bit last year, so it was nice to see a little bit of a rebound this year. And we can add 1.23% to our cap for this year. What's in purple, which you can clearly see in the 1920 cap, is related to the changes in our capital tax levy. So this is our capital projects, the debt service and the building aid that we receive on that, as well as our bus purchases and the transportation aid that we receive on there. And a new change in the law this year was the exclusion of the BOCES capital construction, as we're part of the Monroe 2 BOCES. So last year we were able to add to our cap about 1.14%. This year we actually had a decrease in the cap of 1.25%. So our cap this year is 1.79%, which is actually less than the basic cap because of those other defined changes that we went through. So as you can see, the property tax cap can change pretty dramatically over the years. Last year our cap was 3.87, and we actually went out at a 3.49. This year our cap is at 1.79, and we're proposing a 1.79 increase in the tax levy associated with that. That is not what the taxes will increase, and I'll talk about the taxes later on in the presentation. Other budget factors include retirements. This year we have 21 retirements currently. We have 9 teachers, 11 support staff, and 1 administrator. And anytime a position becomes vacant, we look at that position. We determine if we're going to replace that position as is, if we're going to eliminate that position altogether, or if we're going to change or modify the position to meet our current needs. So as we move through, and how this impacts the budget is we're often replacing higher paid senior level teachers, support staff, administrators with entry level replacements. So there is a budget savings associated with that. The other big factor for us is what we receive from the state. So the settlement of the state budget. In particular, this year was a very difficult year with everything that was going on state-wise, and then really in the country and in the world. So that has kind of trickled down and impacted our overall state aid that we receive. The largest, most unrestricted portion of that state aid is our foundation aid, and that's coming in flat. We typically use that foundation aid to help offset, increases in contracts or funding those new initiatives, or reducing our reliance on fund balance, or being able to come in under our property tax cap. So with that aid being flat, that obviously was a major budget factor in developing this year's budget. With that said, we also saw a pretty significant increase in our building aid. This is an expense-driven aid. It's really related to our capital projects. And if you've been following the budget over the last several years, and I'll have a slide on this later, it's really all a matter of timing as far as why we received the increase, or we're projecting to receive that increase in this budget year. So I'll have some more information to discuss about that throughout the presentation. And then the last big expense side, driver to our budget is our health insurance. Now we are fortunate because we do participate and are part of a consortium with other districts in Monroe County. So that has helped to keep our rate increase lower than what the community rate increase would be. It's still about an 8% increase, and I'll show how that impacts our budget later on when we get to the actual numbers. One of the other things that we've been really conscious about in promoting and educating our employees on is the move to a high deductible health plan. We have over 140 individuals throughout the district that have decided to move to a high deductible plan, hopefully both saving them money and the district as well. We are one of the more districts that have more participation in that plan in the county than several other districts. So we continue to educate our employees, and if it makes sense, then they move to those health plans. And then really, this is something that I felt needed a slide of its own. We're obviously all dealing with COVID-19. It's really impacted all aspects of our life, and it has impacted our school district as well as far as our budget development process. So we're looking at this, and we're taking a multi-year approach in order to do this. And we're kind of using the 2008 financial crisis as kind of the blueprint on what we think may happen. So we'll talk a little bit about that more later on in the presentation. But we are looking at this as a multi-year approach that we're going to have to overcome to continue to balance our budgets and provide the programs and services that the community has come to expect. In the short term, we've done things like cut off purchasing. We're trying to do everything we can to maximize our fund balance for this year so that we could take that savings and potentially help offset some revenue reductions that we may see in the future. We've looked at reductions to staffing and programs for the 2020-21 year, which we'll go over those later on in the presentation. And we also looked at reducing really all other areas of the budget. Nothing was left unturned as we developed this year's budget. In the long term, we are also looking at reductions to staffing and programs if needed for future years, but we're hoping that we can do that through attrition and not have to have massive layoffs. We're also hoping that our fund balance, our rainy day fund, our savings account, so to speak, will be able to be utilized in order to help balance our budget as we move forward. So as we were going through, one of our goals was to build a budget that gave us the most financial flexibility that we can. Again, because we knew that this was going to be a multi-year issue, we wanted to make certain that we were not only looking at the 2021 year, but also looking several years out as we continue to look long-term financially as a district. As I mentioned earlier, one of the increases that we're seeing related to our increase in state aid is related to our capital projects. And COVID-19 has also impacted our projects. First, it happened negatively where we shut everything down. And then we were able to bring back essential workers like construction and continue some of the work in our district. So we had originally proposed 3 different scenarios in some past budget presentations at board meetings in April and May. Really, we had a scenario 1, which was a high risk scenario, meaning that all of our work would be done by a certain time. We had scenario 2, which was kind of a medium risk, where some of our work would be done by this summer and some of it would be extended throughout the rest of this calendar year. And we had scenario 3, which was the lowest risk, which would mean all of our work would be delayed until after this calendar year. So we ultimately settled on scenario 2, which did bring down our property tax cap slightly, and but it also provided us with some additional state aid, which I'll talk about as we continue through the presentation. So this, I always like to give a capital project update during our budget presentations. So this is a picture of our village elementary school. We had some classroom renovations, and this is some of the new learning space that is available that we're continuing to look to do throughout our capital projects and all of our buildings. So back in December of 2016, the community passed a $32.25 million capital project. We had this as a phased project. So we had a successful bid opening for the final phase, which is phase 2B. That took place in September of 2019. We had a lot of great contractors bidding on our project. We had a lot of very aggressive bids. So we were able to save additional money because of the climate when we went out to bid. Phase 1 of the project was a new roof and mechanical systems at the high school, and also the relocation of our tennis courts. We have experienced some issues with our tennis courts, and we're working with the vendor on a solution to correct that. So that is not finalized yet. The work is done, but we're now working through some issues in the warranty stages of that. Phase 2 of the project took place at Village, Quest, and Merton Williams. That is projected to be completed by the spring of 2020. We have some minor work that we're still completing to finish that up, but we're very close to having that work complete. And then phase 2B, we just got underway right around the April break time period. We're anticipating that this will be complete by the spring of 2021. We're hoping that it will be done by the end of this calendar year. That could accelerate some additional state aid our way. And with our current shutdown, we have been able to make some very good progress. If you've driven by the high school, you've seen the renovation work that's taken place, including the bus loop out front. We are working with Monroe County Department of Transportation. There will be a traffic signal that will be out in front of the high school. I think that's been something we've been working on for several years, and it's finally coming to fruition there. And we're also doing some work over at Northwood. We're doing main entrance improvements at both Northwood and the high school. And then lastly, at the high school, we are doing some renovation work to the science classroom. So we have a lot going on in the area of capital construction, and that obviously plays a role in the development of our budget. So this is kind of the first look at our budget. We broke down, over 800 individual lines of budget into kind of the major categories. And if we jump right down to the bottom, you can see that our proposed budget for 2020-2021 is $84,467,153. That's up about $3.5 million or 4.42%. But again, if you remember, and if you've been following the budget over years, last year we actually had about $1.5 million budget decrease from the year before. That was related to the timing of that capital project. So we knew that we were going to see a bigger increase this year due to the passing and the funding, the permanent financing of the capital project. I'm not going to go through every one of these lines, but I will point out a couple. So the benefits statutory line, that is really driven by the New York State teachers retirement system and the employees retirement system. Both of those rates have increased. The teachers retirement system rate went from 8.86 to 9.53, and the employees retirement system rate went from 15.8 to 16.1%. So those are the driving factors behind that increase. The benefits contractual, I touched on this earlier, related to health insurance. That's really the driving force behind this at almost an 8% increase this year. That's looking like that it's going to be just over $1 million increase to our budget with health insurance. And then debt service is the one that should really be jumping off the screen. That's up 20%. It's just over $1 million increase. And that again is related to the permanent financing related to the capital projects. And that was anticipated. We expected that to go up. And you'll see when we talk about the revenue side, what that costs for us as far as increases in our building aid. So just wanted to show a different way to look at it, kind of a new breakdown to look at. So I'm comparing the 1920 budget to the 2021 budget and breaking it down into kind of the three large categories. So we have the administrative category, the capital category, and the program category. You can obviously see the bulk of our budget goes to the program side of things. We're very, very similar from year to year as we go through this. So just another graphical way to look at our budget so you can see how the different areas kind of impact the overall budget.
All right, moving on to frameworks for success. So within a matter of about a week, we took an $83 million business and made it completely remote. Not only did we do that, but we're proud to also say that we've moved forward with our strategic goals. We may be slowing down a bit because many of these are linked to economics, but we know that we're going to continue to move forward with the important work that we need to on behalf of our students as we also reinvent or reopen school in a different environment. So things are going to look different. We're going to continue to push on these, but we also understand that we may be shifting into some different gears, carrying out the strategic goals of the district. So I do want to share with you the focuses for the 2021 year. Teaching and learning, we've been successful increasing the student pathways to graduation. Just as we celebrated today the top 20, but all the seniors, you can truly see some of the great paths that they've taken to not only secondary education, post-secondary education, but also into career and trades in the military. So we're very proud of the fact that we're putting top-notch graduates out there, and the graduates themselves are working hard to create those different pathways to graduation. We've also been focused on creating more opportunities for students to develop skills in order to meet the need of the current workforce market. So it doesn't make sense for us to prepare students for jobs that aren't there. So we've definitely continued to grow in the area of providing them the skills they need, some for careers that we don't even know exist. So we've been very successful. I want to thank the Office of Instruction, our teachers, and our building administration for the work done there as well. Under people in the strategic plan, focus area 3, address and meet social and emotional needs of our students. So we've done some very heavy lifting here. Certainly all we need to do is turn on the news and we can see working through the COVID crisis, the fact for continued support and growth and nourishment of social emotional needs, not only of our students, but also of our staff. And also with the social injustice that's being experienced more than ever, continuing to work on supporting our students and really working through what equity means for our greater learning community and for our students. So making sure that no matter your race, your religious belief, your sexual identification, gender identification, that you feel welcomed and we are equitable in the education that we provide to you, because all students have that right to that education here in the Hilton Central School District. So we've done some good work there. We have more work to do, of course. I think any school district will tell you that. When we move into goal 5, develop and support next steps to increase positive school culture and climate. We feel pretty good about that. We've been able to include thought exchange, which gives a voice to many of our stakeholder groups. We've recently utilized that through the recruitment process for a Merton Williams principal. We haven't finalized that yet, but we've received that feedback. Those thought exchanges have also been shared with the community and also the staff as far as what we need to do to reopen school once we get the green light from the state government. So we continue to provide those opportunities. Communication is often given as feedback on how we can improve a positive culture and climate, and clearly linking back to the top workplace recognition, we can see we've made progress there. And then strengthen community partnerships. continuing to work in that area to make sure that the community feels one with the school district. We've been able to do that with some of our internships and also through the use of thought exchange and making some of the decisions in the budget process. And then under systems, strengthening program evaluation systems. We need to continue to grow here. This isn't probably a goal that we've made substantial growth in, but we have restructured our administrative unit to include Dr. Miller, who is overseeing the evaluation system, and then also Ms. Zubeda will be playing a role there. And this plays a role as we work on being the most efficient and effective with our budget and the money that the taxpayers provide us to provide instruction. So we continue to grow in that area. And we continue to implement systematic data-driven approaches. So the decisions we make and the systems we have in place are based on science, they're based on social science research, and continuing that work there to make sure that's systematic and data-driven. As far as budget reductions go, as Adam mentioned earlier in the presentation, each time someone leaves the learning community, whether it's through retirement or they leave to go to another district or job opportunity, we always evaluate that. So we've had some good success in the administrative realms of restructuring. So if you remember, some of you may not, Dr. Thayer retired several years ago. We were able to restructure in that area of the administration. Most recently, we lost Dr. Zaffitz to the Greece Central School District, and we restructured the technology department there. And most recently, we had a data administrative opening, and we were able to marry that with another position in need for the district. So although there's not an administrative reduction in this proposed plan, over the last 24 to 36 months, we've been strategic. And when you compare the number of administrators in the Hilton Central School District with other school districts in Monroe County of our size, we have some of the fewest numbers as far as central office and district-wide administration. Also, moving through the staffing reductions, we're very proud of the fact that we were able to make some of these reductions through attrition. We always want to keep the reductions as far away from children as possible. But with that being said, we know, unfortunately, that this isn't a positive budget for keeping everything away from students. Unfortunately, we have had to make some reductions to staffing. So you can see the certified staff through attrition, you have 5.2, layoff of 1.1. Others, we have 1.9 for a total of 8.2. For classified staff, which would be more of your school-related personnel, we have a 1.0 through attrition, 2.0 layoff, 1.0 other, for a total of 4. And that gives you a total in this recommended proposal of 12.2 reduction of staff. So we've done, like I said, we've done everything that we can to keep it away from the classroom, but we do know that this will most likely have somewhat of a negative impact on our overall operations. We've also addressed supplies, conferences, field trips, and district-wide initiatives. So as we do look to move forward with the strategic plan, we know that many of those great initiatives that were brought forward through some of our Shark Tank meetings will not be able to be supported due to this budget, and we will be limiting conferences and supplies as well.
So as we move to our revenue budget, the first thing I like to point out is that our revenue and expenditure budget equal. So you see that same $84,467,153 budget. I'm not going to go over every single one of these lines, but just to point out a couple, the state aid is up $2.8 million. Most of that is related to the capital project, as our foundation aid did come in flat. However, we did have some projected aid coming in for the capital project. The property taxes, which is the other large category revenue source for our budget, that's at the 1.79%, which is at the property tax cap maximum. That will increase the levy by just over $717,000. If you look at the reserves and appropriate fund balance, no changes there. We did have a little bit of a change in the mix between some of the reserves, but overall it stayed flat between those categories. The last thing I'll point out is the sales tax. Sales tax is something that we're keeping our eye on because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because we're seeing businesses shut down and people not spending as much money as they have in the past. We are making sure and looking at that. So there is some risk associated with that. there's actually some risk associated with our state aid as well. In the settled state budget, there are 3 revenue reduction assessment periods where the state can come back to local municipalities, including school districts, and make a reduction to their budget in the middle of the year. That doesn't give us a lot of time to react to that. However, that is why we're trying to be as flexible as possible, take that multi-year approach, and be able to utilize the fund balance that we're trying to maximize in order to get us through any of those reductions without having to have additional layoffs. So there is risk associated with that. The other risk regarding state aid is in the area of transportation. If we do not spend the same dollar amount as we have in the past or what we projected, then we're not going to receive as much aid. So with the shutdown and the buses not being on regular routes and being idle, we have the potential of spending less, therefore receiving less aid, but it also does provide additional fund balance for this year, again, hoping that we can weather the storm with that. And then lastly, which isn't necessarily here, and this is more on the politics side of things, the governor of New York is really pushing to have a federal stimulus package. If that federal stimulus package comes through and it does support local municipalities, including school districts, as he's suggesting that we need, then we could see the potential of having an additional revenue source come in related to that. So if that does come in, that's going to be great news for us as a district and school districts across the state, as they will hopefully be able to avoid layoffs. The downside to that is once that federal stimulus money goes away, if the state hasn't recovered financially, then we're going to basically just be delaying the reduction. So that's something that we're also keeping an eye on as we developed our budget. So this is kind of the history of our appropriate fund balance and reserves and how we used those funds in order to balance our budget. And this is really acting as the roadmap for what we're going through right now. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. The red on the slide represents our fund balance that we're using to balance the budget, and the blue represents our reserves that we're using to balance the budget. So the combination of those two, you can see back in 2008-9, we had a very small amount that we needed to balance our budget. We then had the banking collapse, financial market collapse in 2008. Really didn't have too much of an impact on our next year's budget, a 2009-10 budget. We had a slight increase in what we used in our fund balance reserves to balance our budget. We didn't have any major layoffs or reductions to programs, supplies, conferences, etc. But then it really hit us in the 10-11 year. And you could see that what we had to dip into on our savings side really increased. We did have some federal aid that helped offset that, but we had millions of dollars worth of cuts that we had to go through in order to balance our budget. Then you see the next year, 11-12, that kind of spiked up again. That was because the federal stimulus money then disappeared. So the state wasn't prepared financially to be able to backfill that for districts. So we again had to tap into our savings about another $500,000 in order to balance our budget. And then as the economy began to improve, we were able to, again, meet that goal of weaning ourselves off of using our fund balance. We've had a nice downward trajectory since that point in time. We've kind of leveled off a little bit here, but we're anticipating something very similar to take place due to the COVID-19. So if we look at that, we could have probably balanced our budget this year without too much impact. However, we looked at it as an opportunity to kind of analyze those positions, make those reductions as was discussed earlier in the presentation, to set us up to hopefully weather this for the long term. We are looking to build our fund balance. If we solely use our fund balance only to balance this budget, we would anticipate on being able to do that. If we followed this same model in 2008, we would run out of fund balance in about 3 to 4 years at max. So we know that this is going to be a multifaceted approach over the next several years in order to balance our budgets. All right, so now what a lot of you are interested in is what is this going to do to our tax rates? So even with a 1.79% increase in the tax levy, we are still projecting a tax rate decrease. If we look at the 4 towns that make up our district, in 1920, both Clarkson, Greece, and Parma were all at 100% equalization rate, and the tax rate was $22.94 per $1,000 of assessed value. Hamlin was at 93% equalization rate, so their tax rate was a little bit higher at $24.67 per $1,000 of assessed value. As we are working with the town assessors at each of these towns, looking at what's the changes are, projected changes for tax assessments and for the equalization rate, that's what brings us to the projected 2020-21 numbers. So for this upcoming year, both Clarkson and Greece will remain at 100% equalization rate, and their tax rate will be $22.78 per $1,000 of assessed value. That is a 16-cent decrease from the year before. Hamlin and Parma are both going to see their equalization rates drop. Hamlin is going to go from 93% down to 91%, while Parma is going to go from 100% down to 97%. So they're going to see increases in their rate. However, it doesn't matter which town you live in. If you have a home valued the same in any one of those towns, you will pay the same tax bill. And that's what the equalization rate is meant to do. So if we look at kind of an example for each of those towns, if you owned $100,000, and I use that number because it's easy to do the math on it, and you lived in the town of Hamlin with an equalization rate of 91%, when you receive your tax bill, you'll see the assessed value at $91,000. Even though the home is valued at $100,000, because the equalization rate's at 91%, the assessed value will only be $91,000. If you take that and divide it by 1,000 and then multiply it by the projected tax rate of $25.03, you get a projected tax bill of $2,278, which represents a $16 decrease from the year before. Similarly, if you look at Parma, if you had that same home valued at $100,000 with an equalization rate of 97%, when you receive your tax bill, you'll see an assessed value of $97,000. If you divide that by $1,000 and then multiply it by the projected tax rate of $23.49, you will pay the same $2,278 tax bill and have that same $16 decrease from the year before. The all other, which represents Clarkson and Greece, that same home value at $100,000 that has an equalization rate of 100%. When you receive your tax bill, you will see the assessed value at $100,000. If you divide that by 1,000 and multiply it by the projected tax rate of $22.78, you will pay the same tax bill of $2,278 and the same decrease from the year before of $16 per $1,000 of assessed value. So again, it doesn't matter where you live in the district or what the equalization rate is. If you have the home that's the same value, you will pay the same tax bill. And again, this is something that over the years, as we've looked at this as a district, we've been among the bottom in the county for our property taxes. So, you know, we've been anywhere from as low as 4th in the county to as high as 7th in the county. This past year, we were at 6. We're anticipating, based on the information that we've received from the other districts, that we're going to be projected back down to the 4th lowest in the county overall. So again, we've been very consistent over the 10-year history with our tax rates. Also on the proposition this year is the bus purchase proposition. We are replacing buses that are 10 years old. They typically have between 100 and 140,000 miles on them. Our district does encompass 70 square miles. We're transporting 4,800 students on a daily basis on 360 different bus routes, and we cover 47 schools and programs throughout the county. And each year, our buses are driven a total of about 1.5 million miles a year. So this year, we are looking to spend just over $1 million. The plan is to replace 6 of our large buses, 69 passenger buses, 2 of our 30 passenger buses, and 2 of our 24 passenger wheelchair accessible buses. Buses are financed over a 5-year period. We operate them for 10 years, and the first payment will fall in the 2021-22 school year. And over 85% of the cost of the buses will be reimbursed through state aid.
All right, so we'll bring you home here in the presentation. So we do have the election of board members. There are 2 seats open. We have 2 incumbents running for those seats, and Marianne Chafee and Brian O'Connor, and we have newcomer Colleen Nowacki. Voting guidelines. So usually this is a gloss over. Most everybody understands what the voting guidelines are. There are some things that are different this year. You must be a citizen in the United States over the age of 18 and a resident of the school district for 30 days. That stays the same. But voting will take place by absentee ballot. So the district has sent 2 ballots home to each household. If people need additional ballots, they can contact our district clerk, Mrs. Norris, to have those. And the absentee ballots must be received by 5 o'clock on June 9th. So that's really important. I know I've canvassed many of our community members, and they do have their ballots. So there is ample time for them to return them, and they must be received by the district at 5 o'clock on June 9th. So at this point in time, I want to thank everybody for their patience. There was a lot of information. I want to applaud everyone who's put the work in to develop this budget, and open it up for any questions or comments from the board, and also anyone viewing today's hearing.
I have 2 questions that have come in for the public hearing. Both are from Michelle Nelson. The first is on the budget presentation, slides 9 of 17. There's a summary of one way to cover the budget deficit involving attrition, layoff, other. What would be included in the other category?
I can answer that question. So the slide that is being referenced is actually from a previous presentation that's on our website, but we had a very similar slide on this presentation. It was on slide 21 and when we were talking about the budget reductions. The other category is comprised of 3 different areas. It's comprised of what's called a 6-period stipend. So if we have, based on enrollment, the need to offer an additional course, instead of hiring somebody to do that, we look to have a teacher pick up an additional section to teach that course. So we're eliminating those as needed, and we do that pretty much every year based on enrollment. The other category that falls into other are those part-time employees. These are annual appointments. Again, it's not somebody that is a full-time employee of the Hilton School District. This is a part-time employee where we are no longer going to require those services for the following school year. And the last is a particular position that we are eliminating. However, the person is being moved to a different area of the budget. So they're not losing their job, they're just going to a different area within the district. So that's what the other category makes up on that slide.
And we have a second question also from Michelle Nelson. Does the Hilton cost per pupil include all students, including out-of-district placements, i.e. BOCES?
I can answer that question too. It does. It includes all of the students that we educate, whether it's in district or out of district. So those students that are attending BOCES either through a MOCO program or through a special education program, those counts are picked up. We do pay for those so that we do include those in the counts. The information on the per pupil is submitted to the Monroe County School Boards Association, and each district submits those counts and their budget in order to develop or determine their per pupil cost.
And those are all the questions that I've received from our communications email.
At this point, any questions from the Board of Education? I know you've played a large part in the development of this plan. If you had any questions, we'd be happy to answer those. All right. Thank you very much for your support.